I've got a lot to say about this. How long we got, Tom? Pod Squad. Go on, Nick. You go before I unleash. Hi, it's Amol in the Today Podcast studio.
And it's Nick as well.
And we always say, don't we, Nick, that we're keen to hear from our listeners. We always plug the number because we're keen for questions and comments. And we pay very close attention to the voice notes.
You mean we actually mean what we say?
We mean what we say. And we say we want questions. And the thing that we mostly want questions about, because I think it is a thing that we can, as they say, add most value on, is journalism. So why we do what we do, why we cover the stories we cover, why we don't cover the stories that we don't cover. Because the one thing that you and I, between us, are meant to know a little bit about with our accumulated decades of experience is journalism.
That's right, because I think what I find on social media, when I talk to people, when we meet people, that's what they say. Why were you so aggressive in that interview? Why didn't you ask that question? Why do you insist on banging on about that story, but you seem to ignore that one? And the closer we get to an election, the more the world is troubled. People will think, here, I really want to hear about that, but you seem obsessed with this. And it is actually genuinely helpful, as well as we hope interesting for you, help for us, to try to get underneath why we take the decisions we do.
Nobody could accuse you of banging on about anything, Nick. But we have recorded an extra bonus episode this week for you, our lovely listeners, and it features brilliant questions from you, from all the listeners to this podcast, which you've been sending in over the past few weeks, and for which we would say a very sincere thank you.
Here's Ross in Dorset.
This podcast has been a bit of a gateway drug to me, particularly after you interviewed Alistair Campbell. So I'm now listening to his one, listening to Americast and Newscast. Thank you for introducing me to this format. It did occur to me, I wonder if it's the antidote to rolling news.
Oh my, I've got a lot to say about this. How long we got, Tom? Pod Squad. Go on, Nick. You go before I unleash.
I know what you're going to say. You're going to say...
Have I got a thesis? By the way, the fact that you've been ribbing me for having a thesis and saying...
News is so boring.
You know, I'm not going to say news is so boring. I'm going to say the fact that you've been giving me such a hard time in my absence for having a thesis about everything, which ends up with being 3 points. Well, I have got a thesis here. Ross, thank you very much indeed. I do think it's something of an antidote to rolling news. There's a whole sort of separate part of this, which is whether or not the people that we interview, the politicians, for instance, are more attracted to podcasts because they think of it as a more fun place to go. That's a whole different world. Yes, I do think of it as an antidote to rolling news. You know, when I was off recently for a little while, thinking about my young family, I had a very different relationship with the news. And I would say I had a much more healthy relationship with the news. You know, when you do the Today programme as your main job, it's an incredible privilege. You're surrounded by truly, truly brilliant people. But you do have to fill your head, usually your sleep-deprived head, with a huge amount of perishable information. And on this story about William Ragg, the Tory MP who sent pictures, it was a honey trap story. And on the Angela Rayner tax story about her council house, two stories that really matter. Really important issues. If Angela Rayner's broken the law, that's a big issue. William Ragg had done things that lots of people were very upset about. You know what I did, Nick? I didn't follow the ins and outs of it every single day. I didn't look at which Tory MP had tweeted about Ragg and what such and such person had said about Angela Rayner. What I did is I read books and I watched sport and I changed nappies. And on the Sunday, or in fact the Monday afterwards, I just read a slightly longer piece about it, which told me all that I needed to know. And I feel fully informed. And so rather than having that rolling news, and I don't want to talk too much against the Today programme, which, you know, I'm very proud to be part of, but I do think lots of people, especially when we know that news fatigue is on the rise, do see podcasts as an antidote to rolling news.
Well,
there we go.
Yes.
Here we go. Come on, let's have a dust up.
No, as Louisa, the editor, predicted, I would say, why do you need an antidote? I mean, do both.
Compliment, okay.
Compliment. You know, you don't need to do one or the other. The thing I always say about my chums who make podcasts often for other outlets is they can only do them because they've been listening to the Today programme. The number of times on the leading commercial podcasts, including Alistair Campbell's, I know, and to his credit, he often gives us credit. That's why I'm very happy to give credit to The Rest is Politics.
They do the same on Political Currency with George Osborne.
Yeah, often say, I was listening to, right? They can only do the long, reflective, the considered, because they have themselves, or certainly their producers, but often themselves, been listening to news. You need to do it. You need to hear those big interviews. You need to hear the analysis. You need to hear the correspondence around the world. So, look, I love podcasts too. They're more reflective often. They can go deeper. That's what we try and do on the Today podcast. But if you want to know, which lots of people do, what's happening now? What might be about to happen now? What's the key question that someone should answer? You've got to listen to a daily news programme, because a nice cosy chat on a podcast sofa, and I'm talking to you from a very comfortable podcast studio with our branded mugs and our pot plants and our cushions, is no substitute for having the guy or gal in the chair opposite you and saying, today people need an answer. Are you giving Israel weapons? Are you not giving Israel weapons? Are you apologising for what you did? Are you not apologising?
All of that might well be true. And that, annoyingly, I agree with you that it's not an antidote. So that's the one bit of Ross's question, the central word, I guess, which I would take issue with. But I'd ask you a secondary question just to throw it back to you, which is that you're a news junkie.
I wasn't. I used to work in current affairs.
You're a news junkie now. I know you do.
Now I am.
You're a big time news junkie. And I would ask, A, what's a healthier relationship with news? And B, what are more people choosing? And I think, as you and I have talked about, if you look at that Reuters report into the state of digital news and so on, the big trend, which is one that we on the Today programme grapple with every day, is news fatigue is rising. Lots of people are saying they feel saturated, are saying there's too much, it's too negative, whatever it might be. And I think Ross is alluding to something, which is that a lot of people do prefer a different pace of news. And I just think that I don't want to be that guy who says that raises questions. I hate it when people say that. But I do think that changes the role of daily news. And I do think you and I have to be extremely mindful of the fact that there are lots of people for whom daily news is getting harder to stomach.
They're listening to it anyway. You see, I don't buy this. They're getting it on their phone. The difference is the Today programme when I grew up, that was the only place you could find out what was happening in the morning at that time. And when I grew up, there wasn't even telly on in the morning. The big dramatic change is that most people get up and they do look at the news, but they look at it on their phone. It might be news curated by the BBC or one of the other big news suppliers. It might be what their mates have sent them or what they see on a social media site. But they do look at the news. Now, given that they've got those headlines, a morning news programme like the Today programme has to add value. It's no use just telling them what's going on. They can find that through a quick flick at a screen to do that. But there's a separate thing, I think, which is given that we can get it all the time on our phone, on social media, on a rolling news channel, as well as on the traditional news programmes like Today, how do we keep ourselves sane by not consuming it all day and not obsessing about it and not having the space to pull back? So when I was on holiday, I didn't listen, actually. I chose, and that's quite rare for me as a news junkie, not to listen, and I could have done easily, given the internet, wherever you are in the world, it's perfectly possible to do that. And I relaxed as a result, but I missed it as well.
I just think that lots and lots of people are deciding that a healthier relationship with the news is to avoid rolling news. That's one point, that more people are deciding that because of news fatigue, etc. But the second point is just as journalists, for us, is it right that we are in the weeds of incremental development all day, every day? Or should we more often, even on daily programmes, zoom out, look at the trends rather than the events? I think we do too much on events.
We've reached agreement.
Have we?
We can do both.
Don't pretend to agree with me when you disagree.
We can do both.
Can we?
Of course you can. Yeah, of course you can.
I think we should.
I think we do. If you listen to 3 hours of the Today programme, but when you present 3 hours of the Today programme, you will get big, thoughtful items about the future. We can discuss the balance. Should there be more of one and less of the other?
I think you said that we agree with each other. Actually, I think we slightly disagree. But anyway, that's good. We
agree on one bit.
We want productive disagreement here.